Welcome to Monkey Off My Backlog, the podcast where we exercise our pop culture demons by tackling our media to-do lists 1 week at a time. This is episode 4. I'm your host, Andy Bowman, and with me are my co-host, Tessa.
Hello.
Dr. Sam Morris.
Hello.
And with us this week is special guest, Steve Guntli.
Hello.
This week, Steve becomes infamous, Tessa goes lemonading, Sam learns more about mass incarceration, and I start the apocalypse and confuse my compass in East of West. Steve, you are like us. You have a pop culture backlog.
I do.
What is your general relationship with your backlog? Are you somebody who tends to actually work through it, or does the list just get longer and longer?
I am somebody whose brain is always looking for ways to sabotage him. I am somebody who will find reasons to be anxious about something when there's nothing to be anxious about, and my backlog is kind of an extension of that. I'll always put something in my backlog, like whether it's my Netflix queue or whether it's a game like I'm sure I'm going to play or a book I'm sure I'm going to read in the moment that I buy it, and then I put it on the shelf and it just kind of mocks me for months or sometimes years at a time. And I start feeling guilty, like I owe something to this piece of media that I acquired. Like, I don't know. And it just kind of spirals from there. So it always feels really good when I clear something off. But I'm trying to walk away a little bit from this idea of a backlog because I find I'm just creating so much more stress for myself, And there's kind of the idea that like if something's been sitting in your queue on Netflix for like more than a year, it's likely you're not going to find the enthusiasm to watch it. I don't know. After a certain point, it's just like you don't need to watch this. But I also still feel guilty removing it, So I come up with new ways to be anxious about it all the time.
Yeah, I know for me personally, there's this like window where if I hear about something, I can consume it with like a month's time, or it's going to be 7 years. Yeah.
I have a tendency of like jumping on board movies like right around awards season, like because I'm like, oh, I heard this one's good. I heard this one's getting nominated for all these awards. And then when the award season actually rolls around and it doesn't get nominated for anything, then I'm like, oh, well, I guess I don't have to watch that anymore. And then I feel terrible because it's like it's still probably a good movie just because the awards don't acknowledge it. It's still probably good. I should be watching it, but I don't.
So, Steve, are you what we would call a compulsive list maker?
Oh, very much so.
So I'm still alone. I don't make lists. I've only started making lists, as I've pointed out before, but you compulsive list makers really worry about your lists a lot.
We really do. We really, really do. And I'm always making new lists. I organize my life on Google Sheets and things like that. So, like, yeah, it's a problem.
Yeah. Tessa, you don't understand how good it feels, though, to mark off something on a list.
Yeah, but if I don't have to look at a list, then I don't remember all the things I've missed out on. So it's like tricking myself. But I do have lists now. I have started making them for this podcast. So maybe I'll experience that as we go along.
Yeah. One of us.
Yeah, and one of these weeks we have to discuss the inherent evil of doing this podcast and adding to other people's lists. All right. So Steve, talk to me a little bit about this game you played. What game did you play, and how long has it been on your list?
All right, so for this episode, I played the game Infamous, which debuted on the PS3 in, I think, 2009. It's made by Sucker Punch Games, who also made the Sly Cooper series of platformers, which were always really fun. I bought this game used at like a Hastings or something in Colorado when I was still living there. I think it was like $5 when I bought it like a decade ago. With the idea, like, it's like, I'm going to play this. Like, of course, I'm going to play it. This is a big game. Everyone's heard of it. It's supposed to be a lot of fun. I'm going to play it. And then right around that time, pretty much every studio was releasing these gigantic open world sandbox games. And after a certain point, it's just kind of like, all right, how many of these can I realistically play? Each of these are like a huge time investment, and there's a whole new mechanic to learn in every one of these. And some are kind of definitely bound to be better than others. So it's been sitting on my shelf for a long, long time. And I finally just dusted it off and decided to pop it in. And turns out it's not as long of a game as I thought it was. I was able to beat it all within, I don't know, the last couple of days. I think whole thing was maybe, I don't know, 8 to 10 hours. It wasn't too terribly long. Yeah. So that was Infamous. I finally got it knocked off my list. It's, I liked it. I think I liked it. It's one of those games, like, it's kind of hard to look at games from about 10 years ago in the shadow of the things that it kind of inspired and the things that came after. So I think in a lot of ways for me, the open world genre has kind of been like ruined by Spider-Man, the PS4 Insomniac game that came out a couple years ago. I think that just got the mechanics so right. It's so fun to use. It's so easy to get around. It's massive. There's tons of stuff to do all the time. And it just all works perfectly. And it's married with a really, really good story. So Infamous has kind of a lot of the same mechanics and a lot of the same ideas that you kind of see in Spider-Man down the line. They're all just much, much rougher. And I don't know, it's dated in a lot of very interesting ways. Like, do you remember when, like, a decade ago, every game had like a good and evil system, some kind of like karmic balance that you have to do? In this game, I feel is really, really obvious about it. Like, and really, it manages it very poorly. Like, literally, your character will stop and, like, the screen will go sepia tone, and then he'll just have this inner monologue. It's like, oh, I could shoot that guy and stop a crime from happening, or I could let a crime happen and then laugh and pee on them or something. It's like it's always like so rapidly disparate. Like these are very, very obvious good and bad choices. And I feel like the thing that they're not really confronting is that the fact that whatever choice you make, the fact that he has to stop and think these questions out, like he has to think, oh, I could like shoot this guy and rob him. Like, if you're thinking that, you're probably not a very good person. Like, if that's occurring to you, if that's entering your mind that that's something I can possibly do, you're maybe not the best guy, and I think that kind of solves it. So there's absolutely no nuance to any of this. I found the story pretty bland. Have any of you played this game?
Yeah, I played it through.
Okay.
Now, one thing that I remember about this game is also when they give those choices, they have to like tell you what the results will be, right? It's So and sometimes like the results aren't actually obvious, so the game has to be like, I might rob this poor old man of money, but I'll get more money. Although he might not be able to afford his chemo treatment and make a special weapon for me later. Like, it goes way into depth about how, like, the possibilities, because they don't want people to make uninformed decisions. So,
but like, uninformed decisions are what kind of make those games interesting. Like, you don't necessarily know what's going to happen based on it. So that is interesting that they like spell it out for you.
Although
in such an obvious way.
I don't know, when Tessa plays Mass Effect, and that's what I thought of when you mentioned like the morality choices in the system, was how much Tessa loves Mass Effect. You do know what's going to happen whenever Tessa makes a choice. She's going to punch somebody in the face.
That's true. That is generally my default option.
Yeah. Just in life too, yeah.
Yeah,
it really is. It really is.
But yeah, so it sounds like things have definitely gotten a lot more nuanced and sensitive in those types of games since Infamous.
They have. And I think a lot of games are kind of doing away with that as a mechanic, because these are such elementary decisions. Like, this isn't a complex thought. It's like, should I do something explicitly good or something explicitly evil? And I think it adds some replayability to the game. Like, if you're one of those people who likes to go through and play it all the way on the good track and then play it all the way on the evil track, I find I have less enthusiasm trying to do it on the evil track. And that's just because, I don't know, it feels weird running around just like shooting unarmed citizens on the street and with your electric hands. And I don't know, it doesn't feel right to me. It doesn't feel fun. And then the story is just never quite as satisfying. But, like, the mechanics here are really fun and pretty intuitive. You have basically the premise of the game is that your guy gets supercharged with, like, this magical sphere, and it turns you into this superhero with all these electrical powers that you get to upgrade throughout the game, which is, it's really nice. There's a good sense of progression. You grow in your powers like gradually as the game goes on. And all the things you get are fun to use. Like eventually you're going to be summoning lightning storms from the sky that can like wipe out buildings. And that's very satisfying and a lot of fun. And probably wise that they gave that to you more like closer to the end of the experience than anything else. But I really enjoyed my time with it, and I found I kept wanting to go back and play it. I don't know if I'm going to remember much about it in a year. I think I'm probably going to be conflating it with a lot of other games I've played, like Just Cause or, The Saboteur, other open world games like that. But I enjoyed my time with it.
I remember there was like a big hubbub in the video game world because the other open world, morally ambiguous game, Prototype, came out.
Right.
At the same time.
That had a very similar premise. Yeah, where you're a superhero. I think you turn into like a monster in that one or something like that. But it's the same. It's a guy getting superpowers, yeah.
Now, did this make you look forward to, playing the other games in the series?
I was thinking about that, and like I've heard that the one on the PS4, Infamous Second Son, is really, really good. And so I might actually want to check that out now that I have a little more grounding in what the series is and what it's about. I could get behind that. Yeah.
And I guess the last question here is just overall, do you recommend people add this to their backlog?
I don't think this is going to be a high priority for anybody because I think the issue does still stand. It's that there are a lot of open world games out there. There are a lot of games that kind of did what this game did better. And there are lots of games that have been inspired by this one to kind of do things better. I think you won't regret your time playing this. I don't regret my time. I had a lot of fun with it, and it's just kind of fun shooting lightning from your hands and floating between buildings and grinding on power cables and doing all that kind of goofy stuff. I would say a low priority, but yeah, sure, toss it on. It's probably very cheap still, and you can check it out. Yeah.
So what I'm hearing is that I should probably play Mass Effect again.
You should probably play Mass Effect again. Yeah. Or go play Spider-Man PS4. It's great. Go do that.
So we have to go get a PS4.
Yes.
So first step, PS4.
Get on that.
Step, play Spider-Man. Gotcha.
Third step, profit.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why I actually played this game is it was one of the free games that Sony gave when the PlayStation Network crashed for a month and a half, and they were, we found out how terribly they treated our security. Yeah.
Oh, I mean, this one was being pushed by Sony pretty big when it came out. I remember this. They have that PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale, that kind of Smash Brothers spin-off with Sony characters. And I think there's like 3 characters from Infamous in that game. And I didn't know who any of them were. So I'm just like, oh, okay, I could be Cole or Evil Cole. Great. Really fun.
All right. We're going to kick it over to Tessa. Tessa, what did you experience this week?
So I actually watched it this morning, so it's very fresh. I watched Lemonade, the visual album by Beyonce Knowles Carter, which came out in 2016. It came out on April 23rd of 2016. Which shall always be known as the day that both social media and mainstream broadcast networks became obsessed with who Becky with the good hair is.
Fine, it was me. No.
It was not, for the record, it was not Rachel Ray. Who, by the way, what has she ever done to you, like Guy Fieri? Nothing.
Sam is very defensive of Rachel Ray in this situation.
For no good reason.
Yeah. This was really interesting because I didn't watch it. I had obviously listened. Okay, guys. I obviously listened to Lemonade when it came out. Like, I'm not that far behind on my backlist, my backlog. But I hadn't seen the visual album, partially because it was kind of difficult to access it, especially at first, because it was just on Tidal. And it was at a point in my graduate school career where I really did not have any spare money to be subscribing to streaming services. So I sort of missed that window where everyone had watched this and everybody was talking about it. And, we were talking about this before we started recording. Once you sort of miss that window, it suddenly becomes harder and harder to go back and watch these things. So I finally made time to sit down and watch it this morning. And I think, I'm trying to think of ways to describe this particular film. I think the less I say about the specifics of what happens in the visual album, the better. So I'm just going to kind of give some broad strokes descriptions of some of the things that I found kind of interesting and important. There's obviously some really relevant and really important images from this film that I'm sure everybody knows about, even if they haven't seen it. Beyonce in the yellow dress with the baseball bat is obviously like a huge pop culture image. Formation, a lot of people have seen that music video, even if they haven't seen the rest of the visual album. So that's why I kind of chose this as the thing I wanted to do, was because it just has this like place in pop culture history. There have been a lot of articles recently talking about how it's one of the best films of the 2010s, not just music videos, one of the best films of the 2010s. So I wanted to revisit it. I wanted to see it, and I wanted to cement my knowledge of why it's so important to a lot of people.
And how long of a movie is this? I've listened to the album, but I've never seen the actual visual album.
It's actually a 65-minute film
Okay.
/ art piece. It's interesting because when I started watching it, I thought it was just going to be like Olivia Newton-John's Physical, or one of those things where it's like every single song has a music video, but it's a lot more cohesive than that. There are sort of distinct sections that go along with the songs from the album, but each section sort of seamlessly flows into the next one, and there's definitely a cohesion to it. She's trying to say something very specific. And actually, I think some of this, I liked the album when it came out. I still like the album, but I think some of the songs make more sense in the context of the visual album. So it's sort of like an art piece that's also attached to an album, but it's also kind of a film at the same time.
Now, what are there like anything? Is there anything even more added to it by it being visual in nature?
Oh, yes. yes. So one thing that's not visual, I guess I should start there, is you have the songs, but then you also have a lot of Beyonce voiceover. There's a lot of sort of spoken word poetry types of things that she does to sort of connect each section to the next. There's a lot of meta, very, very meta, very postmodern sort of references to other pieces of Black culture and Black art. I know there's been a lot of think pieces that will go through this production with you, like second by second, frame by frame, and tell you like, oh, this is a reference to this, and this is a reference to that. And so I think that a lot of the songs actually gain new meaning when placed within the context of the visuals that she's trying to use. Yeah, this is just such a fascinating piece. Like, I could probably watch it several times and still not get all the layers of what she's trying to say with this. But overall, if I were to sketch out some themes that she's interested in, she's very interested in sort of the emotional, physical, sexual, economic labor of Black women. That's like a huge thing that she's exploring here in this piece. She's very interested in sort of the legacy of trauma and hope, like how that can be generationally passed down between Black women. It is also very, very much about Jay-Z cheating on her. Something that she does not try to hide from, or he doesn't really try to hide up from. He appears in this. He is in Lemonade. And so it's really interesting because I think this is a piece that's a lot more personal than what we had seen previously from her. It's sort of like she's opening us up into this view of this affair and sort of the emotional damage and collateral that it caused in both her life and his life. So yeah, there's a lot here. I really could just go through and talk about like each aspect of it. I won't. I'm also not the primary audience for this, so I feel like there's a lot that I probably missed because it's just so saturated with Black culture and Black music. There's a lot of references to Hurricane Katrina. There's a lot of civil rights references. At one point, she has a voiceover from Malcolm X saying the most neglected person in America is the black woman. You know, there's just so much here that you could unpack. She has a lot of features on here, a lot of collaborations. So if you've listened to the album, you probably know that she collaborates with Jack White, The Weeknd, James Blake, Kendrick Lamar on the actual music. But in the visuals, she has Serena Williams is in there, Winnie Harlow, Zendaya is in there. There are some little home videos of Blue Ivy in there, which, as we know, she has since then become like sort of her own pop culture presence. There's a lot of references to Drill Team. There's references to Madonna, True Detective, sort of interesting looks into like the food of Black culture, Black Lives Matter. I mean, I could just go on and on and on about the images in this, and I won't, because I think that this is definitely the kind of thing you have to sort of see and sort of sit with in order to fully experience it.
Huh. Wow. I mean, I don't even think I've listened to the entire album, so this is really interesting to me. It's not that I have anything against Beyonce. I just haven't gotten around to listening it, and then it being on Tidal when it came out was kind of a deal breaker for me.
Yeah, I think it was for a lot of people, to be honest with you, because, I mean, and this is not anything against Beyonce or Jay-Z, I just think that Tidal definitely gatekeeps a little bit when it comes to just, you have to fork over so much to have access to some of the content. So I think when it came out, that did cause a lot of people to not have access to it. But now I think it might be easier to get to.
Well, it's also really interesting because Tidal back then, Jack White was also involved at the beginning. Prince was somebody, I believe, who had signed on with them as well. But it was really one of those times, like now we're in this discussion about video streaming services, about how niche it's become. And, you know, are you going to fork your money over to CBS this month? Well, what about Peacock when it comes out? How else are you going to watch the Psych movie for the 10 of you who care about that? of which we are too.
Yeah.
This is kind of I remember that. It's like, but we'll have a free trial. You don't even have to pay to sign up. It's like, yeah, but if I sign up, then I have to remember to quit. And, you know, it was really one of those things. It was, you know.
I will say, though, if you are considering watching this and, like, the only way you can watch it is through a free trial to Tidal, it would definitely be worth watching. Like, I haven't even talked about how striking the visuals are in this. Like, she has a couple of different directors who have some pretty prestigious places in music video filmography, but she's clearly the person with the hand on the helm here. She has a very tight control over her artistic vision here, and I would definitely say this is an important text. It was important in 2016. I think it's still important, for sure.
I have to be sure to check that out. I feel like that's like, I'm more familiar with kind of the parodies of it than of the actual video itself. Like they did a parody on Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, and then the Lonely Island did one like the Bash Brothers Experience. It was kind of being a visual album like that. So I definitely want to check this out.
Yeah, I would definitely say, give it a shot. Definitely required viewing in some ways. I think I remember when this came out, SNL did a sketch that was about how suddenly all white people have realized that Beyonce's black because of this album. And I think that's definitely, like, revisiting it, it's like, yes, like, this was definitely not her turn towards that, because that had always been in her music. It was always a big part of, you know, sort of her pop culture presence. But it's definitely, she definitely wants to talk about these things. And she does talk about them in a really beautiful, very sexy, and very, very nuanced way.
And this is only available on Tidal right now, or is this anywhere else? I think that's always been the issue, is just kind of accessibility for it.
I think it might only be
Tidal
on Tidal.
and I guess it's on physical media. I guess you could buy.
Yeah, you can also buy it.
Okay.
As a physical album.
Okay. Well, cool.
Okay, Sam, what did you do this week for your monkey? What was your monkey this week?
Well, I decided that it was time to watch the 2016 documentary 13 by Ava DuVerney. Ava DuVerney directed Selma, directed Wrinkle in Time, as well as the Netflix miniseries When They See Us. 13th is also on Netflix. Interestingly, it was nominated for the Academy Award, and in my head it had won, but it didn't. It actually lost to. This was the year that the 10-hour O.J. Made in America miniseries came out.
Ooh, yeah.
And it was interesting. There was some controversy around that because, of course, it aired on ESPN, and it's 10 hours, but it did have a theatrical run to qualify. Like, they paid for theater space to show that 10-hour thing. And, I mean, it's really good. I mean, if, like, you know, that's definitely a thing to spend some time on as well. But in my head, I'm like, wow, those two documentaries came out in the same year. So the 13th, the documentary it gets its name from the 13th Amendment, which is the amendment that outlaws slavery. But the thesis of the documentary is the clause in the 13th Amendment, except as a punishment for crime, whereof the party shall have been duly convicted. So this documentary is really about mass incarceration and how mass incarceration has affected the Black community in America, specifically Black men. And it's a really good documentary. I really liked it. I knew a lot of what they talked about. I knew most of what they talked about, especially the parts that I've been alive to see happen, which is everything from Reagan on down. But it was a really smart documentary.
So what's in it? Why did it appeal to you so much in that way?
So this is really, there's two things going on here. And the first one really is that it takes us through, it starts with Birth of a Nation, the I believe it's 1915 movie by D.W. Griffith. And, talks about how that really was such a big deal at the time. There was a private screening for it in the White House, and how it really gave an image, a long-lasting image of how many white people perceive Black men especially. One of the interesting things that I did not know, Birth of a Nation is famous for reviving the Ku Klux Klan.
Mm-hmm.
And they did not burn crosses prior to Birth of a Nation. That was something D.W. Griffith came up with because it was a cool visual.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that.
And so it moves, the documentary moves forward through history, talking about Nixon's rhetoric of law and order, the war on drugs with Reagan, which led to mass incarceration, Bill Clinton signing the big crime bill omnibus that gave us mandatory minimums, helped lead to 3 strikes and you're out, calling Black men super predators, which is something they show the clip from Hillary Rodham Clinton back in the 90s using that word, and then it's juxtaposed right next to Trump talking about the Central Park Five, which, by the way, this comes out right before the 2016 election. So it's interesting.
Oh, wow, so he wasn't even really on the political radar when she started making this.
Right, and so it's really interesting because some of they talk about Trayvon Martin, in the beginning of the Black Lives Matter movement, as well as ALEC, the legislation kind of think tank that corporations and a lot of Republican lawmakers are, tied together with. But you can really tell at the last little bit, they kind of started to put Trump in focus on the campaign trail and started drawing connections between his rhetoric that he used on the campaign trail and a lot of rhetoric that was used in the late 19th century. It's almost like they knew that he was going to be elected, and that's very interesting. So just the subject matter was really interesting.
And I know when you were telling me about this later, you said that there were a lot of contributors that you didn't know were involved in this. Tell me about some of them and how they were sort of involved.
So Tessa and I, we just watched, was it last week or was it 2 weeks ago? 2 weeks ago, we watched Just Mercy. Just Mercy, by the way, if you haven't seen that, you have to see it. It's well worth your time as well. It was completely ignored when it came out, and it has Michael B. Jordan in it. So that's ridiculous.
And Jamie Foxx.
And Jamie Foxx.
Yeah,
that's right. There's other people in that movie.
Yeah.
But so Just Mercy is the story of Brian Stevenson, who does who moves down home to Alabama to do work for unfairly incarcerated men on death row. So he does a lot with this documentary. Angela Davis, who is a professor emerita in the University of California system, but is probably more well known for the fact that she is one of the key figures in the Black Panthers. Henry Louis Gates Jr., Harvard professor who does Discovering Your Roots and was also famously arrested in front of his own house. Newt Gingrich and Grover Norquist show up.
Wow.
Yeah.
With a straight face, they're both in there? Wow.
Yes. Grover Norquist is very, you can tell that he's doing this as a bit. But Newt Gingrich tries to be very genuine. He actually says that passing the crime bill that they passed when he was the majority leader was a mistake and they shouldn't have done it. And you sit there and you go, I don't know if he's serious or not.
Yeah.
But if he is, doesn't matter. But it's very interesting. Ava DuVerney is very good about letting people's words and as they're interviewing them, and letting the historical footage that's included just sit with you. And these contributors do such a good job giving context and giving thoughts. So Brian Stevenson, again from fictionalized, or not fictionalized, but brought on the screen in Just Mercy, he says at the very end of the documentary, talks about people who think about, well, how can you tolerate slavery or lynching or segregation? And if I was alive then, and these are the last words of the documentary. He says, we're living in this time and we are tolerating it. And that's a very powerful message. I think the other most powerful thing that came out of this documentary, there's a poet named, I'm going to try not to get this wrong, Malkira Cyril. And she talks about Black Lives Matter. She talks about a lot of things, but when she talks about Black Lives Matter, she says, the thing about Black Lives Matter that a lot of people don't realize is it is about everyone's life. She says, it's about changing the way this country understands human dignity. And talking about that whole Black Lives Matter, All Lives Matter thing, I really think that was a really powerful way of putting it. And it's right there on Netflix. It's an hour and 40 minutes. It's not much of an investment, but there's so much education that can be had there.
So, would you recommend this?
Absolutely.
Monkey?
It's not, don't get a bowl of popcorn and expect a good time. But again, even for somebody who has encountered this history and is aware of it, there's still a lot to be had here. So I can imagine, if you're not an expert in the history of Jim Crow and segregation and civil rights, just how much there is here.
I think it's valuable too, because it sounds like, I think a lot of younger people right now, or not even younger people, are necessarily like, they're kind of responding to the oppression of Black people by the police like it's a new phenomenon, or like it's something that's only been coming around for the last like 10, 20 years or something like that. And this is lifelong. Like this is throughout the entire history of our country. It's been inescapable and it's been a fact. And I think it's important to confront it, like going back to its roots.
Well, and I think it's interesting too, what Sam mentioned at the beginning about the 13th Amendment is that we always talk about like, well, that's the amendment that abolishes slavery. Yay, it's a good amendment. But it has, like, even within that, it has those, that exception, right? That loophole, the thing about criminal charges. And so just even the ways in which when we try to make, good things happen, or I was not alive when the 13th Amendment was made, but like, even when, there seem to be these advances, there's this systemic issue that keeps sort of creeping back in that allows, these things to happen.
Yeah, and something you're hearing a lot about right now is, and I think it's a really powerful message, and this is what the 13th does very well, when you put that clause, that thing about incarceration in the Constitution, that is the law of the land. Mm. And it's basically saying, as soon as you enter the prison state, you are a slave again, and that's what a lot of people are talking about right now. You think about these things, well, this really just started. This is what's happening right now. It's a response to one person or to one person doing this. It's not. It really is something that you have to go all the way back and see how we got here to really understand why you can't just go, it's one person or it's one person doing this. There's a lot more into it. So that's absolutely a good reason to investigate the documentary too. So
it's, I mean, nothing's happened recently that makes this documentary more relevant, right?
No, not at all. Not at all. I would certainly prefer to say just watch it because it's a good documentary, which it is.
Yeah. Consider it if you need it, it is good, and most of us need it. It is good anti-racist education.
Yeah. I am very much looking forward to. I had mixed feelings. We won't go into it, but I had mixed feelings about Selma for a couple of reasons. Overall, I liked it, but there were some things about it that I didn't. I have no such reservations for this. I'm looking forward to checking out When They See Us as well, which is on Netflix. Okay. Severe transition. Andy.
Severest of transitions.
We went to one emotional place, now we're going to a different emotional place.
That's So, tell us about East of West.
Okay. East of West is a graphic novel series by Hickman. Oh man, this is great. So we're going from talking about a world where the 13th Amendment was done to a world where the world posited by East of West is one where a slight turn of events happens during the Civil War, and that slight turn of events is that the American Indians all get together, form a big nation, and keep the Civil War going in a stalemate with the Union. So there's this interesting tension that the Union is fighting against tyranny for certain people with the Confederacy, but at the same time they're fighting pro-tyranny against the American Indians. But this is a world where that happens, the war continues on, and eventually 7 nations of America are created, and this story takes place in the year 2064. Everything about the world is a little different. It's a little weirder. It's a little bit sci-fi-y, a little bit less sci-fi-y. And the main character is Death of the 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse. It is a journey about him going through this world. It's very much a Western. It's very fascinating. But Steve,
yes,
you are a man who has a collection, and I also compulsively have a collection. And one of the weird things about my one of the big collections I have is actually trade paperback comic books, the collected editions that are about 150 or so pages. I compulsively buy them, and I bought 8 volumes of East of West a year and a half ago.
Mm-hmm.
They have been sitting on my bookshelf. What do you collect, Steve?
Oh God, a little bit of everything. I have lots of vintage video games. I have a shelf full of amiibos. I've got a shelf full of books. I have trade comic books as well. Music, movies. I'm kind of stocked up on a little bit of everything. I'm kind of a pack rat.
Right. There's this weird feeling when you like finish a collection or you get an entire run. I've looking at my my comic book shelf. Listeners of my other podcast, Geek 101. Well, no, Transmetropolitan, Preacher, almost all of The Walking Dead, etc. It just feels good to spend way too much money on just having all of one thing.
Yeah. No, I get that. Yeah, there's a completionist kind of streak that needs to be satisfied by that.
Does this come from the same impulse of checking things off your list?
Maybe.
I think it definitely does. Yeah.
It gives you that same high of like, oh, I get to cross this thing off. I get to have the whole collection.
I've accomplished something, and here is the proof that I have accomplished it. I can see it because I have put a check mark on a piece of paper, and now I can move on with my day.
Yeah. Man, I did some like tallying on how much money I've spent on trade paperback comic books versus how much of them, one, I've read, and two, how much of them I have read more than once. And that's it's not a fun realization when you tally up the numbers. But this is just a very interesting world that has been created, right? It's slightly sci-fi. It's 40 years in the future, but the world is just completely different. It is very much a western in both the looks of it and the way it, just the general way it is. And it is the whole thing is it's death versus the three other horsemen of the apocalypse. The three other horsemen, famine, pestilence, and war, want to bring about the apocalypse, and death does not yet. It sounds like it'd be a little bit of a Good Omens kind of thing. It is not. It is not very funny. It is very, very violent. Very, don't get attached to characters. They do die rather on the regular.
Yeah.
Is death somehow affiliated with one of the? I mean, is the war still going on that you mentioned, or is that all backstory?
Right. That is all backstory. The war ended. It tells you that they signed the armistice in 1908.
Wow.
Creating the seven nations, of America. It is fascinating when you actually find out like what the seven nations of America are, because one of the nations is actually derived from China. Mao Zedong in this history gets kicked out of China and goes to America to start another nation. There is the Kingdom of New Orleans. There's the Confederacy is still alive and well, and of course the leader of the Confederacy looks like Colonel Sanders.
I mean, yeah, this all makes sense.
Yeah, this tracks.
Yeah. It's a fascinating world, and more importantly, one of the things about this world that and why I like comics in general is that it's a lot of this story is told visually, right? You understand more about this world by when they show you the certain areas of the Chinese nation. They have, a more Asian look to the architecture. Certain areas of other places have a different look. The Native American nation, called the Endless Nation, they have a bit more of a shamanic look to it, but it's also a technology based story. So you're seeing lots of weird like little technopunk flourishes, and it's just this. It's a world that feels fully realized visually alone, and that's what really drew me to it.
Jonathan Hickman is a very, very interesting writer. I think I've read a few of the trade paperbacks of East of West. I haven't finished it. He's kind of one of those guys, like he's incredibly smart, and I really appreciate how dense the worlds that he creates are. And I think it kind of presents the same problem that Blade Runner does for me, which is that I can acknowledge how stunning this is and how amazing it looks and how rich these ideas are, while also kind of being left a little cold by it. I think, like, I don't know. I'm not sure if I'm the only one who has that reaction, but I feel like there's a certain sense of heart missing, a certain kind of propulsive readability about some of his work that I don't know, that I just haven't quite been able to get on board with. I hear he's doing some amazing stuff with X-Men right now.
I believe one of our co-hosts has taught a class on graphic novels.
Oh,
I have at one point.
She also has feelings about Blade Runner.
I also am writing a dissertation chapter about Blade Runner.
Oh.
All of this is stuff that's interesting to me.
Well, I hope I didn't just put my foot in my mouth.
Oh, no. I think that is a very valid reading of Blade Runner. I wonder, you kind of mentioned the East of West has like some you called it technopunk, is that what you called it?
Yeah, it's so
like,
hard to describe.
Is it like a cyberpunk descendant, would you say?
It's a cyberpunk descendant if instead of urban sprawl you had the Western, and I mean Western in like the John Wayne, Clint Eastwood kind of base.
Gotcha. I mean, I think that there is like if you look at Blade Runner or you look at a lot of cyberpunk, there is sort of a Western quality to it, somewhat. I mean, even though you don't have the setting that reminds us of what a typical Western would be, you still sort of have like the gunman and, you know, even if they don't have a gun, they have, you know, this sort of cowboyish. I think that even in Neuromancer they call them cowboys, don't they? The hackers. So there is definitely like a pretty long tradition, I think, of dialogue between Westerns and cyberpunk. But I think that that's also what you were saying about sort of it leaving you cold. I think that actually might be part of a cyberpunk tradition.
Yeah.
Where the visuals are sort of more emphasized than the content of those visuals.
Oh, yeah. Hickman really, I mean, you mentioned Neuromancer. Hickman really reminds me of like William Gibson or of Neil Stephenson or of like these incredibly smart, incredibly dense writers.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Sort of like you're supposed to like look at it and you're supposed to like marvel at it and you're supposed to have this all these thoughts that sort of come from it, but you're not necessarily supposed to dig deeply into it in that way.
Yeah, yeah. And this is a kind of story that I think is best told via comic book because of how much the visuals are needed to like convey what's actually going on. But it also suffers from the fact that, you know, I've only read like the first 2 trade paperbacks and, you know, it's setting up a bigger story. There's a longer game to be played here, and I'm not really I don't know if I'm getting a hint of that or if there's going to be an entire arc after this kind of a thing.
But based on what you've read, does it make you want to keep going?
Oh yeah. And I don't know I really don't know if it's because of what I read or if because I've spent $75 on the entire collection of trade paperbacks.
That's the conundrum. Yeah, you want to get your money's worth.
Right. This is not Saga, which I think is probably the best recent graphic novel by Brian K. Vaughan.
Yeah.
You know, and this is definitely not One Piece, which I think is the greatest long form storytelling ever made. But this is it's not going to be eBayed very easily, I think. I think I'm going to keep all 10 volumes in my collection. I recommend it to people who like this kind of thing. I don't think this is a good entry point.
Yeah, the Manhattan Projects might be a better start if you want to read more Hickman stuff, because it's still a little bit in the superhero vein. And he did a great run on Fantastic Four for Marvel a little while ago. So
yeah, and definitely read Saga if you want to get into comic books. I really think Saga is for everybody.
I taught the first volume of Saga during that class that you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
And I just remember my students being like one of them came in and said, I started reading this and I got to the 3rd page and my reaction was like, what the heck is this? But then I read 3 more pages and I was just invested. Like I'm going to read all of them now.
Yeah.
And so like, I think that's a pretty like once you sort of get used to what Saga is, I think it's hard not to get sucked into it.
All right. I think that's pretty much it for this episode, right? Does anyone have anything else they want to discuss?
No, I think y'all covered it.
We went through this pretty well, I think.
Yeah.
Covered a lot of ground.
I got a couple new monkeys to add to my list here, so yeah. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
That's what we do.
Steve, do you have any plugs you want to plug?
Oh, absolutely. I am the co-host of the show Ultra 64, which is the comprehensive Nintendo 64 podcast. We are going through every single game on the Nintendo 64 that came out in North America and talking about them and goofing around about them and having a good time. So definitely check that out wherever you get podcasts. We also have a Patreon. That's patreon.com/Ultra64pod, where there's a ton of extra bonus episodes on there. We have a podcast called Jest Friends, Jest, that concluded recently, where me and my 2 co-hosts were going through and reading all of David Foster Wallace's Infinite Jest, 50 or so pages at a time. Talk about a backlog right there. That's a book that was on all of our shelves for a long, long time, and we put it off, and we put it off, and we put it off, and finally we had to start a podcast just to motivate ourselves to read it. But we did, and it was a lot of fun. So that's still out there if you want to listen to that.
Infinite Jest is also on my backlog.
Oh boy,
mine too.
Have I got a podcast for you guys?
All right.
Okay, well, tune in next week where I will be straining both the spirit and the word of our 1 year on the list rule. One of the co-hosts, I don't know who, will be covering Knights of the Old Republic, and another one will be covering Wheel of Time.
Ooh.
You can find me on Twitter at Swela Tessa. Swela is spelled Swehla. And you can find me on Letterboxd under the same name.
You can find me on Twitter at Sam_Morris9 and on Letterboxd at RGLeach9.
You can find me on Twitter and Letterboxd at Hebrews Pale Ale. You can find us on Twitter at Monkey Backlog. Email us at monkeyoffmybacklog@gmail.com. Please rate, review, and subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Our theme song, Hot Shot by Scott Holmes, can be found at scottholmesmusic.com. That's all we have. Go consume those monkeys.